Would you like to walk down the center of a room and not worry about traps? Or bypass sight mobs and not care? Over the past couple of months, I've been collecting trap locations and adding them to this handy little map, which, by the way, I assume was made by a dude called Onis? Full credit to him for making the base map in the first place. Thanks to him, I was able to eventually turn this into this. Notice all the red dots and green pathways. This guide is all about explaining how to memorize these trap locations, how to easily recognize the safe paths, and understand the weird names I apply to each room. Full disclosure, you don't have to use these names. These are just the names I use and will continue to use in this video. The names are important because it really helps with memorizing the red dots and green paths. Another disclosure, you don't need this guide to clear. This is just for people that want to feel safer about opening chests in the middle of rooms, feel safer when using rage, and also just optimize their runs a little bit more. This guide is also more or less my love letter to Palace of the Dead, so let me nerd out in peace. Another disclosure. Take these trap locations with a grain of salt. I know that the video title says all traps, but that's just YouTube clickbait, I'm sorry. Due to the nature of RNG, there are probably traps I've never seen before, even after months of doing runs and watching VODs. I will continue to update the map while providing an update log in the description of the video. So please, stop by every now and then to see if there are any changes. I'll have the map down there so you guys can follow along with the video. I will also put the original blank version there too if you want to make your own trap location guide. By the way, shout out to all the names on screen. These are people that have either watched their YouTube videos or live streams and recorded or confirmed trap locations with their footage. I really couldn't have done this without these lovely people. With that all out of the way, let's explain the basics. The 151 sets use floors from either map A or map B. There is no mixing or combining with the two. The game chooses one map and then chooses a section of that map, adds walls, or possibly rotates. Because of how this is done, this means every room is always connected to the same static rooms. It's just that the RNG dictates whether some rooms will be blocked off by walls. It's really important to be able to tell the difference between map A and map B since some rooms look similar. For example, these rooms look really similar, but you can tell them apart based on the room that it's connected to, or if you already knew if it was map A or map B. Here are some characteristics of each map. Map B has the donut room, these boxy pillar rooms, these arches, these portal looking thingies, these ash caves, 4 wall traps, and a bunch of other characteristics you'll pick up on later. Map A has this dip with these stairs, these huge structures that kind of look like tops, these boxes in the hallway that you can use to line of sight, trees, and a bunch more other characteristics. Let's start with map B since the landmarks make it easier to recognize, plus there are 4 wall traps, so I think that's pretty important to cover sooner than later. Starting at the very middle we have Mouse. It's called Mouse because these mounds look like Mickey Mouse. It is connected to 4 rooms. Boobies and Donut are opposite from each other while England and Music Store are opposites. I'll explain those names at a later time, so don't worry about it for now. When it comes to memorizing traps, it's easier to memorize them in groups as no walk zones and walk zones. The traps more or less occupy a straightish path, starting at the Mickey Mouse mounds and going diagonally across the room. The most important trap is this one right here since it requires you to really hug the wall to dodge it. The next most important trap is the one labeled at 2 since if you want to bypass a sight mob by going from Boobies to Music Store, you have to be aware of the trap at 2. Another important trap is labeled at 1 since chests and the exit can spawn next to it. Notice how this green path pattern resembles the patterns in England and Music Store. It's quite nice that it's a repeating pattern all in a row. Here we have England. It's called England because of the next room over, which is Stonehenge. The community calls that room Stonehenge due to the boxy pillars, and the real Stonehenge is in England, hence why I call this room England. There are 3 traps. From Mouse, there's one about here, one close to the middle, but not exactly center. It's a little closer towards Mouse. And one over here. Notice how this trap pattern is pretty close to the one in Music Store. It's very nice that England and Music Store sit on opposing sides of Mouse, and yet they're similar. Next is Stonehenge. Everyone knows about this wall trap right here, but there are actually 3 more traps. One in between these front pillars, but a little closer towards England. One that is actually between the front pillars. Another one that's sorta in between the 2 left pillars, but closer towards the center and back left pillar. Left and behind the pillars are areas that you can freely walk around. On top of that, you can treat this room like a mini donut room, where you can kite around something, letting the enemy bump into these pillars to slow them down. For some rooms, some trap locations spawn way more often than others, and this wall trap is one of those spots. However, that's based on personal experience, so please take that with a grain of salt. If you're in a situation where you want to fish for a landmine or luring trap without a sight pomander up, then this should be the first spot you should try. Next is Music Store. It's called Music Store because of the next room over, which is called Surround Sound. From Surround Sound, there's one here, another one in the middle, but much more forward than the middle one in England, and the last one here. Once again, similar trap locations to England, also the same green paths as Mouse in England if you want to bypass sight mobs. Next is Surround Sound. The boxes look like speakers surrounding you, hence the name. There's this corner spot that everyone knows about, but there are 4 more traps in this room. One is at the top center of these stairs, another one is at the top center of these stairs, and the last one is southeast from the very center of the room. This whole back area is pretty free to walk around, so if you want to use these boxes to line of sight mobs, you can do so with confidence. This corner trap tends to spawn the most often, so keep that in mind for sightless rage or landmine plays. Next is Boobies, which is connected to 4 rooms. Mouse and Boobie Cave are opposites, while Gates and Danger are opposites. This room is called Boobies because of these 2 mounds. I kid you not, there are 2 trap locations on these mounds, which make them look like nipples. From Boobie Cave, there is another trap on the top left of the mound that's closer to the center, another 2 traps that are near the corner between Boobie Cave and Gates, and the last trap is near the opposite corner. You must tightly hug the sides in order to avoid these traps. Next room is Danger, which is connected to 3 rooms, Boobies and Splitting being opposites, while Box Pillars is by itself on the side. Danger and Arena can look similar, so please note the nearby rooms, and also the fact that Arena has an actual arena thing in it. Let's look at Danger from Boobies. There are multiple reasons why this room is called Danger. For starters, there's a wall trap. If you try to walk around this wall trap, you risk running into this trap, which is also dangerous. There's also a triangle formation of traps here, and another one here. These are kind of like those danger triangle symbols. Something to note is that this trap is close to the wall, but can be avoided by hugging the wall. Despite all this danger, the name is also kind of ironic, since this is actually one of the least dangerous rooms. Just walk down the middle and you're good to go. You can also walk around in this corner between Box Pillars and Splitting. You can also walk diagonally through this room from the same corner. Next room is Splitting. It's called Splitting because these 2 grid squares look like they're separating. This separation feature is important to note as the room as a whole looks very similar to Temple and Dip. There's a corner trap on the right. I've been told you can really hug the wall to avoid this trap, but in my testing, I always set it off regardless. There's another trap to the front left of the right grid, another one in the middle left, last one is above the middle of the left grid. Because of this wall trap, you can actually start in the middle of the entrance and walk straight to this corner. This bottom left corner is also very free, as is this top area above the right grid. The next room is Box Pillars. It's called Box Pillars because of these boxy pillars on the side. The first 2 traps are about here and here. Last trap is between these mounds. This bottom right corner is free to move around. Next room is Boobie Cave. It's called Boobie Cave because it's connected to Boobies. You can easily get this room confused with Big Mound Cave, but fortunately, both caves cannot exist without being connected to their respective rooms, so they're pretty easy to tell apart with that knowledge. The most important trap is this one that's near the corner. Please hug the corner to avoid it. Next ones line up in a semi-diagonal straight line. You can use the stairs to line them up. Next room is Gates. It's connected to 3 rooms. Boobies and Museum are opposites while Heaven is by itself on the side. It's called Gates due to being in front of Heaven. Gates roughly has a similar trap layout and green paths to England and Music Store. From Museum, the 3 trap locations are as followed. Be careful of the trap at C since an exit tends to spawn next to it. This trap tends to spawn the most often though. Next room is Heaven. It's called Heaven due to the stairs and pillars. There are 2 traps, one near the corner here that you have to hug the wall to avoid, and another that's lined up with this pillar and the edge of the entrance. The middle of this room is very free to walk along with the bottom right and top left corners. Something to note, these pillars sort of break line of sight. They block aggro but not casts. Next room is Museum. It's called Museum because the walls in the hallway remind me of a museum exhibit. You get the drill at this point. 3 traps, one is at the very center, they line up with the ends of the entrance, they form a linear diagonal line. Bottom left and top right corners are free to walk around. This trap tends to spawn the most often. Next room is Donut, which is the name that the community calls this room. Donut is connected to 4 rooms. Mouse and Arches are opposites, while Arena and Big Mound are opposites. It is extremely important to know your orientation and the relationship between these rooms, as it will help you to know where the traps are. Coming from Mouse, facing Arches, there is an inner wall trap here. The next one is very close to the wall, but it can be dodged by hugging the wall. Remember that this trap is between Mouse and Arena. Another trap is near the first inner wall trap. Another 2 traps here and here. The spot at C is very important to note because a chest can spawn near it. Another inner wall trap here with another trap behind it. The spot at 1 is important because a chest can spawn near it. The spot at 2 is also important because an exit can be near it. Finally, there are 2 more spots here and here in the middle. The placement of these traps allows you to traverse between Arches and Arena with relative ease, just in case you need to avoid a sight mob. Next room is Big Mound, and it's called that because it has the biggest mound. It is connected to 3 rooms. Donut and Big Mound Cave are opposites, while Portal is by itself on the side. From Donut, there is a trap that's sorta close to the mound while also being lined up, but sorta close to the end of the right entrance. 2 traps that are basically touching the mound itself, 1 bottom left and 1 top left. The last trap is near the wall here. Please hug the wall in order to avoid this trap. Starting here near the end of the left side of the entrance, you can walk across the room. This whole bottom left corner is free as well. Next room is Big Mound Cave, which is called that because it's connected to Big Mound. There are 3 traps. Line up with these crevices in the stairs to place them. A and C are closer to each other than B. Next room is Portal, which is called that because of this large structure thingy that kinda looks like a portal. First trap is here, that's near the wall. Please hug the wall to avoid it. Next one is in the middle above this plus mark thing. Next one is lined up with the right side of the entrance near the halfway point of the room. The bottom left and top right corners are free. This back spot tends to spawn the most often. Next room is Arches, which is called that because of these huge arches at the stairs. 3 traps, 2 lined up with the left and right ends of the entrance. Last trap is above the markings on the ground, more or less lined up with the second trap. You can walk straight down the middle of the room, and also the top left corner is free. Next room is Arena, which you shouldn't confuse with Danger. Arena is called Arena because of the arena thingy in the middle. There are 3 rooms connected to this one. Burn B and Donut are opposites, while 6 Pillars is by itself on the side. From Donut, the first trap is near the top of the stairs at this corner. Next trap is at the very top of the second set of stairs from the left. Next trap is behind that, southwest of the center. And the last trap is near the top of the stairs at this corner. Starting here, you can just walk straight through the room. The top right corner between Burn B and 6 Pillars is also free. Next room is 6 Pillars, which is called that because there are 6 pillars. First trap is in the middle, in front of these stairs. Next trap is behind this front left pillar. Next one is behind this front right pillar, but there's more distance from the pillar. And the last trap is next to the middle right pillar with a similar distance away. This whole back half of the room is very free to walk around. The final room of map B is Burn B, which is called that because there's a dungeon called the Burn that's filled with white ash and sand, similar to this room. As mentioned earlier, map B and A both have these rooms, hence why one is called Burn B and one is called Burn A. Both of these rooms can be confused with Meteor, but Meteor has more stuff going on that I'll explain later. For Burn B, the first trap is lined up with the right side of the entrance about this far in. Next trap is about the same deepness but in the middle. Last trap is with the left side of the entrance and it's this far in. You're able to walk through the middle of this room at a 45-degree angle. And also, the top right corner is free to move around. And that's map B. Before we move on to map A, I just want to mention that a diagonal pattern keeps appearing in map B. Museum, Gates, England, Boobie Cave, Mouse, Music Store, Big Mound Cave, Portal, and Box Pillars all sorta have this pattern. None of the rooms in map A have this pattern, but they have their own common patterns we'll mention later. Okay, so it's map A time. Let's start off in the middle with Flat. It's called Flat for 2 reasons. It looks like the Boobie room but without the mounds, hence why I call it Flat. The other reason is that the traps form a house shape, and when I think house, I think housing. And when I think housing, I think apartments. And the English word for apartment is flat. So I know what you're thinking. Darabon, that's really dumb. All I gotta say is, hey, you're really right. Anyways, so Flat is connected to 4 rooms. Single and Space are opposites. Flower Field and Dirt Field are opposites. As mentioned earlier, the traps form a house shape. The roof is pointing at Single while also being closer to Dirt Field. The bottom of the house is aligned with the middle of the room. The top corners of this room are free to roam. Next is Flower Field, connected to 4 rooms. LOS and Flat are opposites, Quad and Double opposites. It's called Flower Field because this room looks like a field of flowers. It can easily be confused with Dirt Field, but Dirt Field has more ash mounds and less of these flower-like patterns. Also, Flower Field tends to have the LOS cubes and or the pillars from Temple in view, while Dirt Field may have these large top-like structures instead. Flower Field has the worst collection of traps. So terrible that I can't find an easy way to memorize them. I just refer to the visual guide. I'll just let the video play to show you how bad it is. All you really need to know about this room is that the top left and bottom left corners are free to maneuver. Next is Double, connected to 3 rooms. Flower Field and TV Store, opposites. Temple by itself on the side. It's called Double because of these 2 grouping blocks. If you look at the map, you'll notice there's a naming convention going on with single, double, triple, and quad, which refer to the number of block groupings in each room. You might be wondering, why isn't Flower Field, Dirt Field, Guard Station Headquarters, and Patchwork included in that list? It's because single, double, triple, and quad all have 2 characteristics in common. First, they're ashy rooms, meaning it looks like the ash is a base layer for the rooms, as opposed to Flower Fields and Dirt Fields' gray cubey base surfaces. Second, the groupings of blocks look sort of broken, as opposed to the neater looking ones in Guard Station, Headquarters, and Patchwork. Please keep these characteristics in mind since they'll help you tell the rooms apart. Coming from Flower Field, Double also has a nasty collection of traps. I'll let the video play to show you these spots. The top right corner between Temple and TV Store is pretty open for movement. Next is Temple. It's called that because the pillars in the hallway and overall look of the room kind of make it look like a temple. 3 traps, one from center in front of these blocks. Next one is a little bit over, lined up with the second staircase from the right. Last one is behind the second one, almost halfway through the cube grouping thingy. This whole left side and top part are free. Something to note is that this trap pattern is similar to the ones in LOS and Patchwork, and all 3 of those rooms are at the very top of map A. Just a little fun observation that helps with memorizing. Next is TV Store. It's called that because these cubes on the wall remind me of a TV store. 3 traps, one here which is a bit distance away from the left side of the entrance, one in the middle with the same deepness, last one behind the first one but just past the middle. All of the sandy, ashy parts of this room are free to roam around. Next room is LOS. It's called that because the cubes in the hallway can be used to line of sight mobs. 3 traps with a similar pattern to Patchwork and Temple. Bottom and top left corners are free. Next room is Quad. Connected to 3 rooms, Burn A and Flower Field are opposites. Patchwork is on the side. This room is part of that naming convention thingy I mentioned earlier. Notice how there's an ashy sandy base floor and collections of these broken cube things. Let's look at Quad from Flower Field. Cool thing about Quad is that the traps form a square. One corner in the middle and the opposite corner about here. The whole bottom and left side of this room are very free. Next room is Patchwork. Called that because it reminds me of Patchwork. Traps are more or less set up the same as Temple and LOS. Bottom and top left corner, free. Next room is Burn A, which we mentioned twice before already. A feature I failed to mention is that Burn A has these spiky mounds, unlike Burn B, which really helps with telling them apart. Burn A has one trap back here, almost lined up with the right entrance of the room. There's another trap behind it that's more lined with the right entrance of the room. Last one is just off this mound. At an angle, half this room is very free to roam around. Next room is Space, which is called that because the pattern on the ground reminds me of celestial bodies, plus the safe area is shaped like a moon. It's connected to 2 rooms, Flat and Meteor being opposites. Coming from Flat, first trap is in front of the center. Next is a bit more forward but lined up with the left side of the entrance. Next one is just off the back pattern at a 45-degree angle. Last one is behind the previous one, just off the same pattern. Safe area is this moon shape on the right side. Next room is Meteor, which is called that because if you squint, this big pattern kinda looks like a meteor. It doesn't actually, but I'm calling it Meteor because it's connected to space and it makes sense. Please do not get this room confused with Burn A or Burn B, as this pattern is much larger. First trap is just off the pattern, lined up with the left side of the entrance. Next trap has the same deepness, but just off this mound. The last trap is sorta at the center of the pattern, but just off to the left. Most of this ashy, sandy area is free to move around. Just be sure to keep a slight distance away from the pattern. Next room is Single. This is part of the Single to Quad name crew. It's connected to 2 rooms, Flat and Pillar being opposites. Let's look at Single from Flat. Similar to Quad, the traps also form a square shape, with one corner at the center and the opposite corner at the top right of this pattern. The ashy sandy areas, minus the area behind the pattern, is free to roam. Next room is 2 pillars. It has 2 pillars. Lined up with the right entrance of the room, and in front of this pillar, there's a trap here. Another one further behind and a little more to the right. Last one has the same deepness and it's in the middle of the room. At the right angle, half of this room is free. Next room is Dirt Field. As mentioned earlier, it looks like Flower Field, but with more dirt. It's connected to 4 rooms. Flat and Tops are opposites, Triple and Guard Station are opposites. Coming from Tops, there are 4 traps that surround this middle pattern, and 3 traps that line up on the right here, sorta lined up with the right side of the entrance. The bottom and top left corners are free. Remember that this wall of traps is on Triple's side. Next room is Triple. Connected to 3 rooms, Dirt Field and Clearing are opposites, Tree is by itself on the side. Coming from Clearing, there are 4 traps that form a square shape, similar to Quad and Single, except it's actually centered against the patterns in this room. I know it looks like a rectangle in the visual guide, but it's actually a square. There is a ton of extra room on the outskirts of this entire room. Next room is Tree. There's a tree. First trap is to the left of the tree, more towards our direction. Next trap is aligned with that one, with a deepness that is close to halfway through the room. Last trap is about here, halfway in between the first 2 traps and past the right side of the entrance. Bottom right and bottom left corners are free. Middle of the room, free to walk through. Area behind the tree is also very free to roam around. Next room is Clearing. It's called that because if you look up, there are trees, but there are no trees at the bottom, so it's like a clearing. This one just has 2 traps, one lined up with the right entrance of the room, this deep, another one with the same deepness but in the middle. 70% of this room is free to move around. Next room is Tops. It's called that because these huge structures kind of look like toy tops. 4 traps that form a square formation, 1 corner that's near the back left of this middle pattern, opposite corner in the middle front part. Bottom, side, and right side of this room are pretty open for movement. Next room is Guard Station. It's called that for 2 reasons. The next room over is called Headquarters, so this room is kind of like a guard building. The first 2 traps kind of give me bodyguard vibes since they're in your face. By the way, this is from the perspective of Dirt Field. Next trap is here, and this one's important to note since you need to hug the wall to dodge it. Next trap is at the bottom left of this guard building. Next one is top left, but a little bit more to the right, and also just off the pattern itself. Last one is bottom right, but not as to the bottom. The ashy sandy areas on the right are free to roam. Top left corner between Headquarters and Dip is also free. Next room is Headquarters. It's called that because of the structure that's above it. And also, the single cube group pattern is very, very clean. 4 traps forming a square pattern. 1 corner here, lined up with the left side of the entrance, and it's sort of close to the edge, but not close enough to be scared of it. Opposite corner, just over here, in front of the very middle of the pattern. The right side and back sides are free. The last room is Dip. It's called Dip due to this dip in the stairs. It also has 4 traps that form a square, but one of the corners is further forward than the rest. The far away corner is in the middle, close to the entrance. Another corner is almost at the left corner of this pattern. Next trap is almost at the halfway point of the pattern. And last trap is lined up with C and A. The right side of this room is pretty open. As mentioned earlier, Map B tends to have a diagonal pattern. Map A tends to have this right angle pattern and square pattern instead. Temple, LOS, Patchwork, Meteor, Burn A, and 2 pillars have this right angle pattern. Tops, Dip, Headquarters, Triple, Single, Flat, and Quad all have the square pattern or close to a square pattern. It's kinda cool to point out and see these consistencies between these maps. And there you have it, that's the video. I'ma go sleep. Laters.